Howdy all, welcome to Adventures Kendall. Today, our episode is part 2 of our Yosemite Valley Railroad series. We'll go from Bagby to El Portal and learn about the railroad as we go on through this journey. I can't wait to take you on it, so pack your bags and get on board the Yosemite Valley Railroad Part 2. All aboard! In last week's episode, we mentioned how the Mariposa County Museum has a nice exhibit to the Yosemite Valley Railroad. But for those unfamiliar with this road, here's a brief recap. Built in 1907, the Yosemite Valley Railroad was created to transport visitors to Yosemite National Park. But during the 40s, a lot of change was happening. Heavy usage of the engines and equipment during the war effort and the construction of the new all-weather highway would spell the doom for this little railroad. Despite those factors, the Yosemite Valley Railroad managed to survive, with shipment of cement from the Yosemite Portland Cement Company and lumber from the Yosemite Lumber Company. But then the end finally came. The Yosemite Portland Cement Plant was sold to the Henry J. Kaiser Company in June 1944. A year later, the whole complex was shut down. And on August 24, 1945, the last regular train made its run. And a short time afterward, the tracks were moved for scrap. Now that we've learned the history of the railroad, let's continue on our journey. In our previous Yosemite Valley Railroad episode, we arrived at the former town site of Bagby, California. Let's keep the journey going by heading from Bagby all the way to El Portal. I'm here at the Bagby recreation area, and across the Merced River is the old Yosemite Valley Railroad roadbed. Normally, this area above Bagby will be underwater. However, we were lucky enough to get this great view from the recreational area of the old railroad grade as it heads towards Yosemite. From here, the old railroad grade becomes a lonely trail as it heads through the Merced River Canyon with all the vistas of the rocks and greenery around it. Along the way, there are little stops for the railroad. One of these stops is very special to me. Near the North Fork River was a spur called Lamer, named after my grandma's great uncle, O.W. Lamer. This little spur track stayed as long as the railroad was there. A few years ago, my dad, my mom, and myself went to the North Fork Bridge to be near the old Lamer spur. As we leave Lamer, we'll pass by other stops the railroad had, including the old Mountain King mine. On our previous journey to Lamer Spur, my folks and I passed the remains of this little mining camp, and as you could tell, there was quite a things going on around here. From Mountain King, we head straight to the little community of Briceburg. Here, the railroad will pass through town and meet the highway as it heads towards El Portal. Today, the area is known as a popular camping area with a small visitor center next to the road. From here at Briceburg, the river, railroad, and road all head toward Yosemite Valley, and we'll get great views of the canyon as we go along. I'm here by the Merced River with the railroad grade right behind me. With the knowledge of the railroad in our minds, let's appreciate the journey as we head to El Portal. With all the splendid vistas around us, I can only imagine what it was like to be a crew working on the railroad and seeing this every day. And speaking of the railroad, there are special spots where you can see remains of old bridges. Here's an example of one. Very fascinating, isn't it? Now let's continue our peaceful, quiet journey through the valley. Now here's a fine opportunity to ride on the railroad grade itself. In 2006, the Ferguson slide brought tons of rock down to the all-weather highway in the valley, blocking the road. And for 15 years, the road has been used for travelers heading into the Yosemite Valley while the road's being cleared. It's rather ironic that an old railroad is saving the day while the brand new road meant to replace it is currently blocked. You know, with us being on the railroad grade, we could pretend that we're on a passenger train heading to El Portal and to Yosemite Valley National Park. At least until we get off and get on the road again. It was fun while it lasted, and we still get a great view of the railroad grade right next to us. And a little further from Savage's trading post here is our next stop, the old community of Incline. Here, the Yosemite Lumber Company will send down logs on flat cars down a long incline where they will meet up with the Yosemite Valley Railroad for a shipment to the Merced Falls Lumber Yard. Even today, the remains of the old lumber incline can be seen from the side of the road. And speaking of incline, here we're on a section of the railroad grade known as Incline Road. And judging by the view, we can only imagine what it was like to ride the train to the park entrance at El Portal. Isn't this view very beautiful? Soon our train will stop in the small town of El Portal, the park entrance for the Yosemite National Park. There once was a nice log cabin depot and a train shed for passengers to be transferred from the train to stagecoaches entering the park. And there was more than just the depot and train shed at the El Portal yard. There was the turntable, the ice house, the powerhouse, railway cottages, and last but not least, the Hotel del Portal. Built in 1907 by the Yosemite Terminal Company, the hotel was a grand place to stay at while in the area. Sadly, this beautiful 100-room hotel was destroyed by fire on October 1917. There was also this motor lodge. Complete with a general store, this place remains at El Portal to this day. In the late 40s, there would have been a small railroad yard here at the entrance at the Yosemite National Park. Today, there's this little monument of the transportation history of Yosemite Valley, with rolling stock and buildings associated with the railroad. Let's talk about them piece by piece. And this is Hetch Hetchy number 6, one of the main exhibits here at the El Portal Transportation Monument. As you can see, this locomotive is quite huge. This locomotive was one of 6 that transported material from the Sierra Railway at Chinese Camp to the Hetch Hetchy Dam construction site. And here's an example of the Yosemite Valley rolling stock, caboose number 15. The function of a caboose is very interesting. It doubles as an office for the freight conductor and has a cupola for the brakeman to watch over the freight train in case of any issues, such as on hotbox. Besides the rolling stock, there are structures here to look at, such as the old Bagby double water tower and the El Portal turntable. I'm standing on the turntable of El Portal. Here, engines of the Yosemite Valley Railroad will be turned around for the trip back to Merced. And last but not least, the old Bagby depot. It is not only preserved, but is also the office for the Yosemite Conservancy. It's wonderful knowing that the old depot from Bagby and the double tank water tower are still here and are perfectly preserved at El Portal. It gives a sense of what it was like to be at either structure at the time of the railroad's operation. This journey has been quite a fun one, and I'm so glad we did this. But now, let's get back on our train and head home. All aboard! Did you have our time on the Yosemite Valley Railroad? I certainly did. especially going through the Merced River Canyon. With all that rock and greenery, it was both rich and beautiful to look at. I also enjoyed our time on the railroad grade itself. It was fun to be on. I could picture myself riding a train on that grade, heading to the Yosemite Valley. Anyway, next week's show, we'll be heading back to Southern California to ride the Marvin Broad Bike Trail. It'll be a fun experience to ride a bike. Anyway, if you have a location you want us to go on, comment or email down below. Also subscribe and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Well, that's all the time we have here on Adventures of Kendall. See you later, folks, and may your gifts bless the world.